Welcome to LeVy Stories, where real-life stories come to life. If you're fascinated by true, emotional, and surprising stories, make sure to hit like and subscribe. Your support motivates me to keep sharing these unforgettable stories with you. Now, let's dive into today's story. I couldn't believe it all began with something so little that it caused everything to come apart. Ethan called from the hallway as I was folding clothes in the living room. "Can you assist me with this?" "Sophia." He was standing at the stairs, fumbling with his belt. When I turned around, the leather strap of his belt had an odd knot, and his khaki shorts hung loosely around his hips. "Please solve this. It's stuck or something," he said as he approached me. "Yes," I said, putting the towels down. In an attempt to separate the strap from the buckle, I stepped closer. "Are you still stuck?" "Focusing," I asked. "In order for me to continue sharing more amazing, genuine tales like this one with you, please ensure you subscribe to my channel. And since this narrative will be so fascinating, remember to like the video and watch it through to the conclusion. To demonstrate your support, kindly click the like button." As I worked, he held his breath and said, "Yeah, sorry." There was an awkward moment as his shorts slipped when I eventually succeeded in removing the buckle. Time seems to stop. I looked down out of habit. I quickly averted my gaze, feeling embarrassed, and then immediately turned my head away. Ethan stood motionless, his hands awkwardly hovering. He said, "I'm sorry," and quickly pulled his shorts back up. I recoiled in embarrassment. "Everything is okay." "It occurs." He stumbled. "Yeah, thanks. For the help." As he hurried upstairs, leaving me alone, my pulse raced. It had been an accident, a fleeting, uncomfortable moment. But thereafter, something changed between us. I couldn't get rid of the sensation that something had altered, and the air seemed electric. Our relationship was never the same after that day, even though none of us ever discussed it. My marriage to Michael was everything but idyllic, nor was it awful, just a routine, cozy and calm, that had gradually become cold. We had both come from unsuccessful first marriages, and we were married when I was 44 and he was 50. Being a creature of habit, Michael kept himself occupied with frequent business dinners, fishing excursions, and golf outings. I had adapted to the quiet between us by occupying my days with housework, gardening, and charitable work. Then came the arrival of Ethan. The son of Michael's first marriage had always been kind but aloof. In the early years of my marriage, while he was still in college, I had only seen him sporadically on required holiday visits. His shyness and awkwardness with new stepmothers are common among young males. However, the guy who arrived at our door 6 years later was not the quiet adolescent I had known. After graduating, Ethan was having a hard time figuring out who he was. Michael provided him a place to stay while he worked things out since his fine arts degree, which he didn't give any thought to, hadn't brought him success. I didn't mind that I didn't have much of a say. The home was spacious enough, and I enjoyed having some company when Michael worked long hours or went out with friends. The way that Ethan's presence would alter the dynamics in the home caught me off guard. There was something appealing about Ethan that drew people to him, in a manner that Michael never did. His contagious grin and dry sense of humor filled the voids in the home. Little moments were the beginning. Ethan came with a cup of coffee, barefoot, and still half asleep one morning when I was mowing the hedges. He smiled lazily as he watched me work, leaning against the door. I said, "You're up early." He drank his coffee and shrugged, unable to fall asleep. "In addition, someone has to respect all of the effort you're making out here." I shook my head and chuckled. "Michael shouldn't hear you say that. This garden, in his opinion, basically takes care of itself. Michael doesn't notice much," Ethan said nonchalantly but somewhat sharply. I was surprised by the remark, but I didn't question him about it. Over the next few weeks, our conversations grew longer and our connections became more natural. While I was cooking, Ethan would stay in the kitchen and tell me tales about his time in college or ask me for help with job applications. I discovered him drawing in his notebook while spread out on the living room sofa one day. I nodded to the pad and inquired if it was okay for me to look at it. After a moment of hesitation, he gave it to her. Intricate pencil drawings, landscapes, portraits, and abstract creations that appeared to come to life abound throughout the pages. I was quite amazed and commented, "These are wonderful." "Thank you," he murmured softly. "I just do it to kill time." I advised that you present them to someone. I suggested presenting them to an art director and a gallery. "Ethan, you are quite talented." He met my gaze with a small grin. "The first person to say that was you." For the first time, I had an unidentifiable stirring inside of me as the weight of his words lingered between us. Things started to fall apart after the belt incident. For days, there was a lot of tension between us that neither of us knew how to deal with. The place was too tiny and too quiet for me to spend much time alone with him, but I tried. We continued to bump into one another. Ethan entered the kitchen one evening as I was doing the dishes, his hair still wet from a shower. He whispered, "Sophia." The sound of my name made me turn, my heart pounding. Indeed, I hesitated before asking, regarding the other day. "I apologize. That was awkward," he murmured, shoving his hands into the pockets of his pants. I immediately turned back to the sink and said, "It's fine. Let's put it out of our minds." He said, almost in a whisper, "I don't think I can." I became cold. I could feel my chest constricted as he spoke. With feelings I didn't know how to manage, I turned to face him. "We can't, Ethan," I started, but I was unable to complete it. He took a step forward, his eyes fixed on you. "I don't want you to believe that it didn't have any significance for me, even though I am aware." I was stunned by the ferocity of his words, and for a second, neither of us made a move. Then the moment was cut short as Michael's voice rang from the front door. I turned away from Ethan and hurriedly responded, "I'll be right there." However, I was aware that something had changed even as I was leaving. Stealing glances and avoidance characterized the days that followed. While Michael remained in the dark, either watching TV or hanging out with friends, Ethan and I had to navigate the maze we had created. Ethan showed up at the doorway one day when I was folding clothes. "Can we talk?" he said in a hesitant tone. After a moment of hesitation, I nodded. "Shut the door." He entered and closed it behind himself. His voice was rough as he replied, "I don't know how to act around you anymore." I shook and said, "Ethan, we have to let the moment go. It was just a second," he added, taking a step closer. "But it wasn't just a moment. Not for me. For me, it wasn't simply a moment either. And I realized it then." Ethan leaned in, and we shared a moment of closeness that night. Even though it wasn't my intention, it happened. "This can't happen again," I informed him later as I retreated. He nodded, but it was clear from his eyes that neither he nor I believed it. After the kiss, the days were filled with silent desperation and stolen moments. Although Ethan and I made an effort to pretend as if nothing had changed, there was definitely tension between us. Every gaze and unintentional contact seemed charged and burdened by our silence. Michael continued to be unaware, his focus split between his friends, his job, and his many pastimes. I couldn't get rid of the notion that we were playing with fire. However, regardless of how preoccupied he was, it took place in the garden the second time. Ethan came up behind me after I had spent the morning caring for the flowers while the warm sun pounded my back. His voice broke through the silence. "You're always out here. It's peaceful," I said, without looking back. He moved in closer, obscuring me with his shadow. "I believe you prefer to stay away from me." Despite my breath catching, I forced myself to maintain my composure. "I have no idea what you mean." "Do you not?" Softly but insistently, he asked. This time, there was no doubt or pause to stop myself as I turned to face him. We shared another moment of closeness, unable to resist the connection. What started off as brief feelings of desire became something we were both unable to stop. We tried to keep our interactions discreet and respectful, but as time went on, we became braver and couldn't help but be drawn to one another. Ethan and I went to the library one night while Michael ate with a client. He stood behind me as I pretended to be arranging the shelves, my hands trembling. He whispered, his breath warm on my neck. "You're trembling," I answered. "I'm fine." But my tone betrayed me. He turned me to face him and put his hands on my shoulders. "You don't need to be scared," I said. "I'm not scared of you." My voice broke as I muttered, "I was scared. I fear what we are doing." His eyes were steady as he clasped my face in his palms, then put it out of my mind. "Simply stay with me." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that the situation couldn't continue, but I couldn't find the right words. Rather, I let him draw me into his embrace, and I felt alive for the first time in a long time. The secrecy added a layer of complexity to our connection. Every moment we shared felt like a break from the routine against the monotonous existence I had grown accustomed to. It served as a constant reminder that, despite the monotony of my marriage, there was still a deep-seated desire. However, dread accompanied the exhilaration. Ethan and I were sitting on the living room sofa one afternoon when Michael unexpectedly returned home. He yelled out from the corridor, "Sophia." As Ethan hurried to the other side of the room, I sprang to my feet, my pulse pounding. I tried to sound confident when I called. Michael entered and looked at each of us. Though his gaze remained on Ethan, he remarked in a casual tone, "Didn't realize you'd have company." Ethan answered, "Just catching up." with ease and a comfortable stance. Michael nodded, but I felt cold from the look he gave me as he turned to go. Even though we were cautious, hiding became more difficult. Michael started asking questions, first softly but eventually becoming quite direct. One evening at the dinner table, he said, "You and Ethan seem to be getting along well." I forced a grin and said, "He's been a big help around the house." With an inscrutable face, Michael nodded. "That's good to see. Knowing that someone is keeping you company while I'm working is comforting." I couldn't quite identify the undertone in his remarks, and I felt the blood drain from my cheeks when Ryan, Ethan's closest buddy, unexpectedly turned there. It was the first serious crack. Ryan was outspoken, opinionated, and gifted at seeing things that others were trying to conceal. One day, Ryan told Ethan, "You've been spending a lot of time at home." His eyes were keen, but his tone was light, casually, "Just helping out," Ethan said. "It must be pleasant," Ryan said, glancing at me, being accompanied by someone. I was chilled by the remarks and promptly excused myself, leaving the two of them alone. Ethan later discovered me in the kitchen, looking agitated. "I know something," Ryan remarked softly. "I'm guessing," I said, a little hesitantly. Ethan gave a head shake. "He's not a moron. Michael will find a solution." The tension in the home became intolerable as the weeks passed. It seemed like a hurricane was ready to happen because of Ryan's remarks, Michael's suspicions, and the weight of our secret. However, my emotions for Ethan rose along with the hazards, and I couldn't bring myself to let him go. No matter how risky it became, maintaining a secret is like holding your breath when submerged. There is a limit to how long you can go until the strain begins to overwhelm you. Although Ethan and I were skilled at concealing, it was becoming harder and harder to hide the holes in our facade. Neither Ryan nor Michael was blind. Then there was Michael's coworker Claire, who was able to make her infrequent visits seem more invasive, uninvited but completely at ease. Claire showed up one Saturday afternoon. She had made a few previous visits to the residence, usually pretending to drop off something for Michael. She arrived with an excessively bright grin and a bottle of wine this time. She entered the kitchen where I was cutting vegetables and said, "I thought I'd stop by." I forced a grin and said, "I'm fine," leaning against the countertop and setting the bottle on the counter. Claire looked around the room as if she were taking notes on every little detail. "This location is stunning. It feels so much more like home now that you've done it," I replied in a strained voice. "Thank you." She kept her eyes on the rear door, from where Ethan had just left. "You and Ethan, of course, are a blessing to Michael. He is very helpful here, isn't he?" Even though my heart skipped a beat, I maintained a bland demeanor. "He's been excellent. Having him around is pleasant." A grin curled Claire's lips, but it stopped short of her eyes. "It probably is." Claire started to visit the residence more often as the weeks passed. She constantly said it was for work when she stopped by, but I could tell her real goal was to get information. I couldn't tell whether it was about Ethan or Michael. One day, when we were sitting in the living room, she remarked, "You know, although Michael doesn't discuss his personal life much, it seems to me that there hasn't always been harmony between you two." My hands gripped the teacup in my lap as I tensed up. I tried to keep my cool and answered, "Every marriage has its challenges." Of course, Claire's grin seemed too lovely to be real, but having Ethan around must help. He seemed to be paying attention. My heart raced as I realized the obvious inference. Ryan came next. Even though Ethan's closest buddy had always been direct to the point of being impolite, his remarks had become more incisive. One evening, when he and Ethan were sitting on the terrace enjoying drinks, Ryan said, "You've been spending a lot of time with Sophia." Ethan shrugged, speaking in a relaxed manner. "She is my stepmother. Naturally, we will speak." "Yes, but isn't it more than that?" With a penetrating gaze, Ryan pushed. Ethan gripped his bottle more tightly. "What are you attempting to express?" Ryan said. "I'm saying you're acting weird, and I think it's not just the job stuff. Something else is happening, and I believe it has to do with her." Ethan's chair scraped the stone as he sprang to his feet. Ryan's eyes tightened. "You have no idea what you're talking about, do I not?" The household tension became intolerable. Every interaction with Michael felt like a precarious dance. Claire's visits were like tests that I was certain to fail. Ethan was also getting bolder and more irritated with our concealment. He turned to face me one evening as we were sitting in the library, his face steely. "I can't do this any longer," he remarked. "We must exercise caution." "Ethan," I said, my voice faltering. "Caring isn't enough," he retorted. "Michael is not as ignorant as you believe. Ryan is suspicious, and Claire is snooping around." I averted my gaze, my eyes stinging with tears. "What do you propose?" That we halt. Ethan's voice became softer as he approached. "I can't do that. But we need to come up with a plan because this isn't sustainable. A dinner gathering that Michael insisted on throwing was the tipping moment. Naturally, Claire was there, as were other of Michael's coworkers. Thanks to Ethan's invitation, Ryan also showed up. With courteous talk, laughing, and the clinking of wine glasses, the evening began innocently enough. However, the mood changed as the night went on. So, Sophia, Claire began, interrupting the conversation. Given how often Michael is away, how do you stay busy? I became cold. Her query was rife with subtext. Trying not to panic, I said, the usual things: reading, gardening, and assisting Ethan with a few tasks. Claire's grin widened. Then you must be extremely near. Ryan looked at Ethan across the table and arched an eyebrow. Yes, Ethan has been coming here a lot recently. It makes sense. I suppose speaking with Sophia is not too difficult. There was silence at the table. Michael's gaze was inscrutable as he glanced between us. Claire's eyes were bright with joy as she took a drink of her wine. Ethan got up suddenly. He said, "Pardon me," and walked out of the room. I got up and hurriedly remarked, "I think I'll check on him." In the dim light of the patio lights, I discovered Ethan pacing the lawn. As I got closer, he replied, "This was a mistake." I inquired, my heart pounding. "What was it?" "All of it," he said in a strained voice. He allowed Ryan to enter, acting as if nothing was wrong. "Sophia, it's not. It has collapsed." I touched his arm as I reached for him. "We will work things out." His eyes were filled with desperation as he gazed at me. "How?" I'm struggling to maintain composure in this situation. We halted at the sound of footfall on the gravel before I could answer. Michael's form was silhouetted in the gentle light as he stood at the edge of the garden. "What's going on out here?" he said in a low, menacing voice. Everything we had kept concealed for so long was going to come to light in the last confrontation. Michael observed us from the edge of the lawn, his stance stiff, his face icy. For what seemed like an eternity, there was stillness. Ethan and I remained still, not knowing what to do. It was oppressive to feel the weight of his eyes. Michael said in a low, menacing voice, "What's going on out here?" My mouth opened, but nothing came out. We looked at one another for a moment, and I could see the terror in Ethan's eyes. I tried to keep my voice calm and forced a grin as I replied, "We were just talking. There is nothing wrong." Michael's demeanor was inscrutable as his eyes darted between us. "Funny how you two seem to have so much to talk about," he continued, his words brimming with skepticism and his voice harsh. Ethan's jaw tightened as he stood up straight. "Is anything wrong, Michael?" Michael stepped forward, a chilly grin twisting his lips. "I'm not sure whether there should be." With every second that went by, the tension between us seemed to increase, and the air seemed to become thicker. My heart was beating rapidly in my chest. Michael realized that he was no longer only speculating. Finally, he had made the connection. After a moment of hesitation, Ethan nodded and turned to go. His voice was strained as he mumbled, "I'll go inside." "No," Michael yelled in a deep voice. "You'll remain here." Ethan paused but remained still. Michael returned his focus to me, his eyes cold. "Would you mind explaining why?" "During a dinner party, my wife and son are skulking about in the garden." The words refused to come out of my lips. With the weight of the moment bearing down on me, I was paralyzed and unable to speak. Michael's voice broke the stillness once more, confirming his suspicion. Michael's attitude toward me was even more icy the next day. He wasn't going to let this go, as shown by his cold eyes and clipped tone. Ethan made an attempt to avoid contact, but it appeared to exacerbate the situation. Naturally, Claire spotted a chance to get involved in the mayhem. Claire sipped her coffee in the kitchen, her voice brimming with phony worry. I couldn't help but notice the awkwardness last night. I tried to seem lighthearted and informal as I said, "It was just a misunderstanding." Claire's grin was too lovely as she cocked her head. "Of course, but you may want to use caution, Sophia, particularly in a circumstance like this. Perceptions can be misleading." My stomach dropped. Her remarks were a threat rather than just a warning. Her eyes brimmed with joy, sending a chill down my spine. Michael summoned me into the study later that night. Although he seemed quiet, there was something unsettling about his stillness. Michael sat back in his chair and remarked, "I've been thinking, perhaps we should make some adjustments, modifications." With a sinking heart, I asked carefully. Michael stated in a casual tone, "Ethan has been here long enough. I believe it's time for him to go on and get a job of his own." I was surprised. "He needs more time to figure things out." Michael interjected in a stern voice. "He can figure it out somewhere else." There is no dispute about this. As Michael made it apparent that he was adamant about Ethan leaving, the tension grew. At last, The impending encounter reached a breaking point. Ethan reacted explosively when I informed him. Ethan's voice rose in shock as he stated, "He's kicking me out." "For what reason?" "A discussion in the garden." "He's suspicious," I responded, attempting to reassure him. Ethan gave a head shake. "He believes that something is happening." "Doesn't he?" "This matter is his responsibility, not ours." I tried to stabilize him by reaching for his arm. We were aware of the danger. This cannot continue to spin out of control. Ethan was enraged. "He isn't acting suspiciously in this way. I will not allow him to dominate you, which is why he is doing this." Everything changed on the night Michael told Ethan to go. Michael's demand was unambiguous, and his tone was icy and forceful. During supper, Michael calmly said, "You have a week to pack your things." Ethan stood up suddenly and threw his fork into his plate. He said, "You don't get to decide when I leave." "This is my home," Michael said in a cold tone, "and I will not put up with this any longer." Ethan became enraged. "What should I tolerate? Why am I here? Or me approaching Sophia more intimately than you ever could?" There was stillness in the room. Michael's expression deepened, and I could feel the weight of his scrutiny, making my blood run cold. His voice was now low and menacing as he stood slowly. "Before I make you regret it, leave this place." I discovered Ethan packing his luggage in his room that evening. Neither his nor my wrath had diminished. Ethan's voice was tight with fury as he continued. "You can't let him win," I added quietly. "This isn't about winning. The goal here is to survive." Ethan's gaze was intense and burning. "You are not required to remain here. You are not required to remain with him." With tears in my eyes, I said, "I don't have a choice." Ethan moved closer to me and added, "There's always a choice. Join me." I gave it some thought while the words lingered in the air. The potential to start again someplace far away and leave everything behind. But I was soon struck down by the reality of what it would entail. I gave a headshake. My voice cracked as I replied, "I can't." Ethan nodded, but his gaze softened. Then, he added softly, "I'll go, but it's not over yet." Ethan left early the following morning. I spent the day pacing the empty home, disturbed by the stillness. As Michael didn't say anything to me, later that night, however, I discovered a message hidden behind my bedroom door, which was the true shock. "Michael, you believe you have won, but you are unaware of the reality. I'll see to it that you do. Truth, Claire." As I read the message, my hands began to shake. Claire was aware. She had listened to or seen something and was now taking advantage of it. The message felt like an imminent threat in my grasp, and I stood motionless, repeatedly reading the words until they became hazy. I went over to Claire the next day. With a shaking voice and a low voice, I cornered her in the kitchen and held out the letter. "What is this?" I insisted. Claire did not recoil. A grin played at the corner of her lips as she leaned against the counter. "It says just that. Wouldn't it be appropriate for Michael to be informed of the truth?" My voice trailed off as I hurriedly added, "There's nothing to tell." Claire's eyes were filled with faux compassion as she raised an eyebrow. "Is that truly what you believe?" "Sophia, I've seen how you and Ethan exchange glances. I'm not blind." My words trailed off as I took a step closer, my heart tightening. "I believe there may be a misunderstanding if you think these tactics will influence my decisions. I will not allow you to ruin my family." Claire shook her head and chuckled quietly. "Did Sophia destroy her family?" "That's already what you did. All I'm doing is accelerating the inevitable process." Michael's voice came from down the corridor before I could reply. Claire grinned broadly. "Don't worry," she said in a whisper. "I'll take care of the scheduling." As he nibbled at his supper that night, Michael was more reserved than normal and in a nervous mood. Even though Claire had departed hours before, her presence continued to hover like a threatening storm. Michael and I were in a stifling stillness. Michael finally put down his fork and turned to face me. "Do you want to tell me anything?" "Sophia." With narrowed eyes, he asked. Panic swelled in my chest, causing me to freeze. I made an effort to grin. "What are you saying?" Michael sat back in his chair and looked at me intently. "Lately, you've been behaving oddly. Claire is also giving me clues about stuff I don't grasp. Now is the moment to let me know if anything is happening." I had a hard time being calm. "Nothing's happening. Michael, Claire is only attempting to cause problems. You are aware of her personality." After examining me for a while, Michael slowly nodded. "I hope you're right," he replied in a foreboding tone. Because if I find out, I understood his meaning even if he didn't complete the phrase. The strain was increasing. I lay in bed that night, unable to fall asleep. The possibilities rushed through my thoughts. I was troubled by Claire's warning, and Michael's mounting mistrust seemed like a ticking time bomb. My phone began buzzing on the nightstand as I was falling asleep. As my heart raced, I grasped it and perused the message. Come see me in the park beside the bridge tomorrow at noon. Ethan. The next day, I pretended to be doing errands when I left the home. Ethan was waiting at the bridge when I got to the park, his hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. I walked up and said, "You shouldn't have called me." My voice was shaking. "I didn't have a choice," he said, his eyes full of anguish. Claire paid me a visit. What? With a sinking heart, I inhaled. Does she know? Ethan gave a nod. Sophia is utilizing her extensive knowledge to reach Michael. My stomach rumbled. Did she say anything to you? He responded coldly. She wants me to confess. She wants me to be honest with Michael. Sophia, she's playing us both. With everything weighing down on me, I closed my eyes. I said, "We're running out of time." Ethan grounded me with his touch as he grasped my hand. We must therefore take action before she does. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If it touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe to LeVy Stories. Your support means the world to me and encourages me to bring more impactful, real-life stories just like this one. Stay tuned for more, and I'll see you in the next video.